This is Will, the voice of the future Dark Knight, Batman Beyond, and you're listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam, streaming at DCAUreview.com and on your favorite podcast app. And remember a few things. First, Dana deserves better. And second, I am Batman.
In the year 2039, Gotham City has no heroes. Its people, no hope. Its youth, no future.
Evening, boys and girls. Who's up for some laughs?
Terry McGinnis was part of the problem.
Right there.
You can't control your temper, and you'd better if you expect to get anywhere in life.
Yeah, I'll be a big success, just like you.
Until a moment of violence brought him to the door of a man named Bruce Wayne.
Let's put a smile on his face.
Leave him alone. Once known as the Batman.
Man, you're something. You okay?
Now, the Dark Knight will rise again to drive the shadow of evil from the streets of Gotham. Let's go! Supervillains, beware! There's a new Batman in town. Batman Beyond. You're pretty strong for some clown who thinks he's Batman. I am Batman. Justice returns to Gotham. Welcome to my world.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 171 of the DCAU Review. I am one of your hosts, Cal, and with me my good friend, I almost said frother there, good brother, good friend, and the gentleman that runs our Twitter account. That's right, it is Liam. Liam, we are here in a month of Batman Beyond themed reviews as we continue reviewing these in their original production, well, not production order, air date, I guess, whatever order it is on the DVD and Blu-ray and streaming service. So we are here to review the next episode in order. Welcome to DCAU Review.
That's right, we are back, and not only is this a episode of Batman Beyond review, but as teased last week, it is in fact the debut, an infamous debut, in that this is the first appearance of the titular character of the Zeta Project animated series. Zeta himself debuting in the aptly titled episode of Batman Beyond here, Zeta.
That is right. So, as we revealed last week, this basically no longer gives us an excuse to avoid reviewing. Well, it eliminates one of the excuses. Let me say that. We still have plenty of excuses not to review the Zeta Project here. That being the only DCAU show that we have yet to review an episode of. So unfortunately, that day has come, Liam, where we now must come up with other excuses as to why we're not going to cover that show. But yes, we are here. We have an exciting review to talk about today. Lots of things to discuss on the episode. And before we do that, as we always do, we have the official Imdb Synopsis for this week's episode, which, of course, we're still waiting for a sponsor on that. If you'd like to sponsor that, reach out to us. This episode originally debuted back on April the 8th, 2000, meaning, again, Liam, this episode is now 21 years old, as we just passed the 21-year anniversary of this debuting.
That's right, and this is for the episode Zeta, which was written by Robert Goodman, directed by Dan Reba, with music by Michael McQuistion, and animation by Coco/Dong Yang. And that synopsis reads as such. Batman meets a good-hearted, artificially intelligent robot assassin on the run from his creators.
I like that they qualify it as a good-hearted robot assassin.
A lot of syllables to say in that voice, I do. But yeah, that's an okay synopsis. As we sort of jump into plot here, yeah, we open in Hamilton Hill High. Terry and Max are in class listening to a lecture from one of their teachers, And they kind of quickly notice that she seems to be reading off of a script, or at least she seems to be reading verbatim from this this article that they are discussing in the class, which sort of sets off some alarm bells for Terry. He kind of mentions that maybe this is just comes with the territory of being Batman, that you're sort of suspicious of everyone and maybe they should lay off. But thanks to the arrival of some armed government agents and a firefight breaking out, it's quickly established that Terry is in fact correct in his suspicions.
Yeah, disguised as men from the telephone company, which of course is a term that you always hear in 2021, let alone 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, whenever now is. The telephone company, of course, sending out agents, on the regular, out on the road. But yes, these secret agents disguised as members of the telephone company confront Zeta and immediately begin trying to wrangle him. There, as you said, a firefight breaks out. Terry suddenly sees that the teacher, their biology teacher, I think it was, their biology teacher escapes from a burning car crash by ripping the roof off of her car and engaging by pulling out weapons of their own, and firefight ensues, as you mentioned, at one point escaping, but not before revealing their true self as a robot in robot form, sort of. So we learned that very quickly there, as you said, that this is going to be an interesting episode. That we sort of next cut to Commissioner Barbara Gordon, who is doing some investigative work and discovers upon the actual real-life biology teacher who has been tied up in her own basement and kept alive. And then we get Barbara Gordon sort of interrogating this special agent Bennet, who is going to give her basically the rundown of just who Zeta is.
You're not cleared for this information.
But since it's loose on my streets, you're going to be smart enough to tell me what I'm dealing with.
It's an advanced tactical synthoid, infiltration unit Zeta, designed for deep cover ops, replace, interrogate, dispose. You're not supposed to like it. High-endurance endo frame, equipped with a full array of weapons and tools. A holographic emitter on board conceals the rig while enabling Zeta to mimic its targets.
And this you people release into a school?
We didn't release it anywhere. It stopped following orders. Ours, anyway. Zeta was on a long-term assignment, infiltrating a terrorist group. 6 days ago, it went renegade.
Why? How?
We don't know. We think the terrorists got to its programming. We have to assume it's obeying them now. And that means we take it out. In a school, on a street corner, wherever we get the shot.
We'll cooperate however we can.
We learn that Zeta is a NSA project, that his whole responsibility is to not only learn and replace people based on their certain... he has a holographic ability to replace people by looks and impersonate them, but really his ultimate goal and his many missions that he's completed on their behalf has been to seek out enemies of the U.S. government, infiltrate, and then replace. We see, well, the term he uses is actually replace, interrogate, dispose. So, there's certainly a killing aspect that's included there. And Terry happens to be standing directly over Barbara's shoulder. He remembered he could turn invisible for this scene only. But yes, so he also gets all the lowdown as well. And Barbara is a little bit worried about the fact that the NSA might continue to have firefights on the street of Gotham with this robot that's running around.
Yeah, and they sort of have a little bit more dialogue as Terry says, well, at least it's out of the school now. It'll be less dangerous. But Barbara is quick to point out that there must have been a specific reason that this highly advanced assassin bot would be hiding out at a high school beyond just camouflaging. So we do, in fact, quickly find out that not only has Zeta returned to the high school, but that he's taken the form of Max. In fact, we have a scene where she happens to be researching blueprints for the Z8 robot and notices that that it has a homing beacon that's sort of looking at blueprints for it, and in the process she's sort of interrupted by Dana, and we sort of quickly figure out something's not quite right, and
Hey, Max.
Dana, what's up?
Thought you might need a ride to Wynn's study group tonight.
No thanks, I'll see you there.
You know where Wynn lives, right?
I'll get directions from her.
Him. You said her? Wynn's a guy.
Sorry, concentrating.
What else is new?
then we get to reveal sort of at the end of the act there as we go where the commercial break would have been that in fact, yes, Zeta has replaced Max and is sort of keeping her hostage at this electronics factory as it continues to sort of research and try to figure out how to get this homing beacon removed.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, there's a brief slip-up where he's acting as Max. He mistakenly calls one student a she instead of a he. Dana sort of laughs it off, and he's able to explain it away as being tired or focused on what he's doing at that time. However, in the very next scene, we see that Terry has a interaction with Max, this, Zeta Max. Not Beta Max, but Zeta Max in this, and he's able to deduce fairly quickly that this is not, in fact, the real Max, because he sort of alludes to his needing help with distracting Dana or keeping Dana preoccupied. Again, Dana, my girl. She deserves better. So much better.
All her friends lie to her.
Yep, she deserves better friends, a better boyfriend, a better life.
That's right.
Yes. And he quickly deduces, based on the fact that she appears to have no knowledge of what he's talking about or alluding to. He doesn't come out and say, I need to go be Batman tonight, but he alludes to having a night job.
Hey, workaholic, let's get some chow. Genoa and Swish, your fave.
Thanks, Terry, but I have a lot to do. Maybe see you after school?
You kidding? With what's been going on, the night job's been full-time lately. In fact, I could use your help covering with Dana.
Sure. What does she need?
Know what? I just remembered I'm free. I will see you after school.
And she has no sort of reaction to that, so he immediately figures out that maybe something's up. So we get the next scene where Zeta returns to this factory, and this chip con is what it's called, where they're manufacturing chips, and his hideout where he has Max tied up, and Max is actually just about to escape. It looks like she's prying back the door, and the door opens up, and Zeta walks in at that point, and there's some back and forth where Max sort of taunts Zeta a little bit, and it appears that she's afraid that Zeta's going to turn around and maybe kill her at that point. But instead, he just provides her with her favorite sandwich, which is a Genoa and Swiss on bread. So I gotta say, it left me a little hungry in that moment, thinking about that. But he provides that to her, and there's a conversation that begins to have. Max begins to see a different side of Zeta, and it's interesting because that initial lecture that they were delivering as the biology teacher was sort of talking about the difference between nature and nurture, and whether or not creatures or people that are born with a certain DNA or a certain proclivity to do things can actually fight against their inherent nature. So it really lays the groundwork for what ultimately becomes, what happens in the rest of this, as Terry shows up as Batman and he's ready to jump into action right after Zeta has decided to sort of turn over a new leaf, as Max appeals to him and asks him what's changed and why all of a sudden he has sort of rebelled against his programming. He explains that he was set out to replace somebody.
Genoa and Swiss, your fave.
Why so nice all of a sudden?
It is not all of a sudden. I have taken great care not to injure you.
Being held hostage isn't exactly 5-star treatment.
This detainment was necessary.
Why? What are you after?
My freedom. This filter will disrupt my homing beacon. They will not be able to find me again.
Those guys who are after you, they built you?
Yes. I was created for one purpose, to destroy. I do not wish to destroy any more.
Prove it. If you don't want to be a killer, then why carry around all those weapons?
They will destroy me. I must defend myself.
Even if it means killing? You're a smart guy. If you really don't want to hurt anybody, you'll find another way.
Max points out that he may be talking about doing that, but he's still attempting to fight back and with weapons and kill the NSA that's attempting to kill him. So he may want to think about a different way of trying to evade and how he can do so without ending lives. And that's kind of when Terry shows up.
Yeah, that's kind of almost the rest of the episode. Almost we see Batman and Zeta have a fight, and we sort of see Zeta throughout this fight still being very violent, still sort of fighting to kill, despite having thrown down his guns. He's still very apt at utilizing his environment to create some lethal weaponry. And then we also see finally though, as the fight goes on and he's able to knock Batman out, Batman is on this conveyor belt and appears like he's about to be crushed by some of the machinery, and Max sort of appeals to Zeta to save him, and he does, and right then Bennet and some of the other agents break in, and once again Zeta utilizes some of the weaponry around him, a laser that was attached to this sort of microchip machine, and uses that as a weapon against the agents. And finally Terry and Zeta and Max are able to escape, and Zeta really wants to turn over a new leaf. He wants to leave, and Max sort of believes in him, but Terry's not really quite sure how to feel, especially because of what he saw in that firefight with the agents, where maybe he doesn't want to do that, but it's clearly hardwired into him to kill and the way he sort of took charge of this welding laser and turned it into a deadly weapon it's giving Terry some pause, and again kind of goes back to what we talked about at the start of the episode, which is Terry sort of struggling with his own sort of inherently suspicious nature that he's established with himself since sort of becoming Batman. And that sort of leads us to our final scene. Zeta and Max sort of create a new disguise for him. Rather than taking on the appearance of a specific person, he's able to sort of combine elements of other people that he has replaced before into a new identity, and sort of takes off hoping to catch a train out of town, but due to some scuffling with some 20-something skiers that happen to be at the train station with him, he's exposed as he's exposed right in front of one of the agents, and once again has to go on the run, and it creates kind of this interesting final fight, and we'll talk some more about the action specifically when we get to visuals, certainly, but it creates this final fight where it seemed to me what they were going for is that Batman doesn't want to directly fight the government.
Yeah.
So he's kind of like hanging in the background. He's like pushing boxes over onto guys, or he like ties up a guy by the feet from behind. Doesn't go invisible, which would have made sense here, but
forgot that.
Yeah, forgot that once again. It all sort of comes to a head as Zeta and Batman sort of take down most of the agents. They're once again confronted by Bennet, and Bennet pulls a gun on him, and Zeta knocks him down, picks up the gun, and trains it on Bennet, and Batman's sort of standing there ready to strike if Zeta is going to take Bennett's life here, but instead Zeta crushes the gun and says that he decides who he is, not the programming that was put into him. And
a very Iron Giant moment.
Yes,
watch that movie.
Yes, absolutely. It's a moment of it's the some people deserve to have their faith rewarded moment for Batman too.
For sure.
Then the agents and Bennet sort of all converge on Zeta, shoot him, and knock him off of a balcony, and he seems to fall to his destruction on the ground below in the alley. But that itself was just another illusion that Zeta was able to create, and he's able to get away, and Batman sort of sets off a bomb to cover his escape, and that's sort of where we leave it. As Zeta is able to escape, get on the train out of town, and Batman flies off into the night.
That's right. All right, well, that's the plot synopsis here, so we can get into our plot scores here. I will say this has, I think, in doing our research for the episode, and ultimately, this became a spinoff that we've talked about and alluded to a couple times here. Robert Goodman is the creator of this character, and so it's interesting. It's interesting that I don't know. We haven't really been able to uncover whether or not this was originally intended to be a backdoor pilot of some kind, or if WB just liked the idea and they're like, hey, we're looking for new shows. Let's take one of these characters from Batman Beyond and do a spinoff. And they're like, yeah, that's a great one. That's easy. So it's hard to say whether or not this was exactly. You figure if it was a backdoor pilot that it would have matched a little bit more of the animation style, or which all of that changes. The look of the character, the animation style, all of that is very, very different in the actual Zeta Project show. So you would think that maybe that was an afterthought. It was, hey, we're looking for a show. We're going to throw this in there. They recast people. There's a lot of differences between the actual show and what he looks like here. So with that said, we know that this was a little bit based off of, or that show ended up being based off of The Fugitive. This idea that there are weekly episodes where he's sort of constantly evading the authorities who are coming after him. And in the meantime, he's sort of solving crimes. It's also a very Incredible Hulk from the Bill Bixby Incredible Hulk series from the 70s. Very similar format in that there's he's constantly on the run from the government, has an interaction with the the freak of the week, so to speak, and then ends up having to leave town at the end of the episode. So with that, I think that works clearly. It certainly works in the superhero world for at least a period of time. I don't know that I would have, knowing that those other series exist, and I wouldn't necessarily like to rip off Incredible Hulk series from DC. But you're trying a something that we know works, a proven concept here when it comes to a superhero show. So with that said, and the idea of the redemptive robot, can we fight against our nature? All of that stuff those are good, like very familiar superhero tropes, comic book tropes. But I don't love the execution, I think, of this. I don't love the episode as a whole. I think that the explanation of why he ended up going to Hamilton Hill as of all the places, it has less security than a national security agency. Well, yeah, no kidding. Like, of course it does. Oh, I'm gonna find somebody as smart who's smart that I'm gonna be able to take their identity, so there's nobody thinking that it's odd that I'm here in the school. Well, why was he hiding as a biology teacher then? I don't understand. He had to do extra reconnaissance at that point?
Yeah, I guess my thought is also, and obviously the answer is because they decided he was going to kidnap Max, and that was going to be how Terry figured this out. But it's like, you would think maybe with what's been established, maybe he's at Wayne Tech or something, and he's posing as an executive or a scientist at Wayne Tech, and Bruce Wayne not in this episode at all.
Not in for a second.
And again, we've talked about that before, that the later seasons of Beyond had more of a mandate to take place in the high school, and again, I don't think it's inherently bad that they went that way, but yeah, I do think the idea that, like, oh, well, I don't want to go to a government facility. Okay, that makes sense. So I went to a high school.
Right.
Instead of, a private company's technology division or whatever. I question that a little bit, but overall, I think my thought with Zeta has always been it's a robot, and that inherently makes it less. It feels like there aren't stakes to a lot of this stuff for me. If it was like a metahuman that could shape change and had been sort of brought up in this private, if they could have retroactively kind of tied it to Cadmus, which I guess they kind of do anyway.
Sure.
In Justice League Unlimited, they established that General Hardcastle was part of the team that helped develop these Z8 combat droids that the Justice League uses for training and stuff.
Synthoids. You gotta call them. Not droids, synthoids.
Right.
Very different.
But because there isn't really an overt connection there, because it's not a a person, it doesn't really feel like it doesn't feel to me like there was any great stakes. Also, and I think this was obviously changed for the series, he doesn't even have a face.
Right.
So he has like this weird sort of, and we'll get more into this in visual, but...
He's got the True Religion logo.
Yes.
Every time I look at him, I'm like, man, I could use some really expensive jeans from the early 2000s
Heck
right
yeah.
now.
Yeah, that's a great pull. But yeah, he has this weird sort of like half curve piece of metal as his head.
Horseshoe.
It's and so there's no emoting from him, and we'll get into it. We'll get into voice acting and visuals in a little bit here, but just for me, I didn't think the character was that interesting. Like, it's an interesting basic idea of the agent that turns on his agent, on the agency, and no longer believes in their mission and just wants to be free, and he's being chased because of, all the information he knows and everything. I think that all works. I just think the fact that it's a robot kind of lessens any importance. And I also think, and if we get into like what would have made a spinoff more interesting to me, Max should have gone with him, I think.
Sure.
If they introduce a female counterpart for him in the Zeta show, if that was Max, I would care more about it. Agreed. But it was just another new character that they introduced for the show. So it doesn't really feel like Batman's world is changed at all, or the greater, we talk about that a lot when we get to the end of our episodes, the greater DCAU as a whole. Despite this show leading to a spin-off, it still doesn't feel like the world at large is all that different because there's a robot that can look like people running around. So
Agreed. I think the other thing that they could have considered doing is that you didn't have the NSA actually be your main sort of antagonist here, because they allude to the fact that he gets uncomfortable at this point after he sees the daughter of this accountant ride her bike for the first time, and he experiences living this guy's life, and realizes that going forward, this guy is going to die. They're going to end up without a father or a husband.
I was programmed to maintain the secrecy of my own existence. Anyone I replaced saw what I was and could never be set free.
But you didn't want to kill this terrorist guy?
He was not a terrorist. His associates were terrorists. He was an accountant.
So he was innocent?
Yes, but that is not why I spared him. Replacing him required that I live with his family. I watched them experience life. I saw his daughter ride a bicycle for the first time. I could not deprive her father of seeing her grow, just because he knew I existed.
Wow.
So why the high school?
I needed computers and electronic equipment. Compared to a government site, a school has little security.
And once you saw who's who at the school, I was the natural choice.
Mm-hmm.
So he's uncomfortable with that, and that's why he rebels against his programming. But we don't flat out make the NSA the villain either. It's not like in Captain America, like the Winter Soldier, where
right.
We learn that the government has been taken over by a terrorist organization the whole time,
right?
Or even. I mean, the recent Suicide Squad movie does a great job of making the government the villain.
They did not shy away. It's not like one guy in the government is bad.
Right, everybody, and that's not even a spoiler. Like that was pretty evident in the first Suicide Squad movie also. But so that theme continues, that Amanda Waller is the bad guy. Like Amanda Waller is the villain of the villains. There's other people in the movie that end up being villains, but she's a villain the entire time, and they don't shy away from that. So Agent Bennet is simply just trying to recover the robot that has gone against its programming. They aren't even trying to get it back into... They're not even talking about, like, well, we need to get this guy back to kill the guy that's actually not bad. Like,
right.
They just need to get it... They feel like it's gone haywire. They need to do its programming. Like, it's a robot. We need to get it back on program. So... I don't think they did a great job of making the NSA the straight-up villain either, which makes this feel at times like, okay, he's running away, and they're trying to kill him, but he's a robot, and he's rebelling against his programming, so what else are they going to do? Like,
Yeah.
let him go, shake hands and part ways. Like, no, that's kind of their responsibility. I didn't have any emotional connection to Zeta.
Yeah.
I think that's what we both come to there, is there's not a lot of emotional connection to a robot, at least not in this 22 minutes. The Iron Giant is probably one of my favorite movies of all time.
Yeah.
They do a great job of helping you to connect emotionally to a robot in that movie.
Mm-hmm.
This, not so much, because you didn't have a full length feature film to, create a story and character that is a little bit more relatable or emotionally easier to connect with, I'd say. So, for all of those reasons, I ended up giving plot a 5 out of 10. What about you?
Yeah, I went one tick higher. I went 6 out of 10. I don't, like I said, I think as it stands, like as a genre episode, as we said, Robert Goodman, very influenced by The Fugitive specifically. Like, I think there's some fun, like, cool spy espionage. I think especially in the second half, once Batman and Batman and Max and Zeta are kind of all on the same page. I think there's some fun sort of espionage thriller elements to it. So I do think there's fun to be had with this episode, and as a concept, there's an interesting idea in there. But it's just, if like I said, if either Zeta had been a human character who could shapeshift, or maybe a stronger villain, this could have been a little bit more interesting, or even like a clearer idea of what Zeta wants to do.
Yeah.
Now that he's not a robot or robot
go
killer, like is he gonna go like start a family? Is he gonna go, is he gonna work for, a different organization? Like, we don't know. Obviously, again, we have a whole series to explore what he wants to do after leaving Gotham. But yeah, at the time, it just kind of ends. And like I said, I don't hate it at all. But it's not. It definitely feels like if we tweaked this, we changed this a little bit, we could have had something maybe even more. Again, for me, and I think for you as well, a little bit more compelling for us, at least.
Yeah, I agree. All right, man, let's move on to our next category, which is going to be animation and visuals. I believe this week was done by Coco and Dong Yang.
Correct.
So, we have this episode directed by Dan Riva. So what stuck out for you? We do have, of course, we're back to digital animation here. We're back to the world of Batman Beyond and Gotham. So we have a little bit visually different than what we've covered the last couple of weeks. So what stuck out for you this week as far as visuals were concerned?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing that comes to mind is the Zeta design itself. And one thing I do generally like about it, despite, like I said, I think it's hard to feel for him because he doesn't have a face, but the way that they sort of show when he's transforming into different people, because at first he's, the teacher, Miss Martel, he's pretending to be at the start as sort of this short, a little bit overweight woman. Later on, he's masquerading as Max and other various people throughout the episode, and sort of when he's playing a woman, like, you see the exoskeleton that is his body sort of contorts and shrinks down, and the head piece sort of shrinks down into the neck. So I thought they did some clever things of showing, like, well, if someone bumped into this, woman on the street and it's just a hologram and it was actually a 7-foot tall robot, you would feel that. So the idea that he actually, like, physically makes himself smaller or skinnier or wider depending on who he's shape changing into, I thought that was a pretty neat touch to the overall design of that character.
Yeah, because that's something you don't always see. The detail like that is not necessarily thought about when you're doing a children's cartoon.
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessarily thought about. Well, they'll just understand it's a hologram. It's a hologram, covers everything. So
right.
Yeah, I will say I felt at times I like that aspect of it. I will say at times that it comes across, I don't want to say as lazy, but it's they didn't really do an effect when he's sort of phasing through his hologram. It's just like animation going into animation at times. So he reaches into his jacket to grab into his rib cage where his weapons are in that opening scene to pull out his guns, and his hand just disappears into the animation and comes out. And I get it. It's a hologram. Mm-hmm. It makes sense. We see it played out throughout the entire episode. It's very consistent. That happens again when the ski goes through him at the end at the train station. But I feel like some sort of effect to kind of give you maybe just like a little distortion or a little bit of, something to show you that the hologram is being affected. It would have been a little bit smoother. I don't know. Would have been given it more of a. It just really stands out. I feel like in a negative way when he puts his own hand inside his sleeve, or he puts his hands in his ribs, or what have you. It's just it feels very lazy at times.
Yeah. I think that's a fair point. As far as the rest of the episode, like we said, he has these guns in his ribcage, which he sort of dramatically throws away at one point in the episode. I do like the bits there where he sort of makes makeshift weapons when he's fighting Batman. He basically goes up to like a power line or a circuit breaker and just grabs it and grabs hold of the wires, and then like a circle opens in his hand and he fires out electricity out of it like he's Iron Man. I thought that was kind of cool. And he takes the wire, as I mentioned, from this like welding laser and plugs it into his chest and then turns it into like a giant laser bazooka. I thought that's a pretty neat sequence.
Yeah, I think that whole fight scene that he ends up with Batman is where you get most of the action that isn't just laser fights back and forth, like gunfights back and forth. So the fight that Batman and he have is sort of breaks up the monotony of just shooting guns at each other, shooting lasers at each other. And I thought some of that stuff was pretty innovative. Like you said, him grabbing that wire and plugging it into his chest and turning it into a giant Gatling gun, sort of firing rapid fire at the NSA agents. Really, really cool. Like just a great shot overall. And then Batman actually swoops in and begins using it in a similar way, but he shoots it at the wall, I think, or the ceiling instead of the actual agents themselves. So, that scene sort of breaks up the monotony a little bit. We didn't really get to see much in the way of transformation other than when Max at the end tells him to sort of come up with his own persona, and she encourages him to sort of mix it up. So we get to see him sort of put those pieces together a little bit, and it appears like no human that has ever existed before or ever will in all of human existence. But he went very subtle with his conglomeration of humans that he ended up persona that the ski ended up going through. So
violence is hardwired into him. It's what he is.
He can fight that. I know he can.
Max, he held you hostage. You want to let him do that to someone else?
I'm sorry. It was my only choice. It's the only way I know to acquire an identity.
Well, we're gonna have to come up with another way, aren't we? Does your memory still hold all those people you, replaced before?
Yes.
Well, then why not mix them up? One guy's hair, another guy's eyes. That way you could decide who you want to be.
Mix them up.
I should go. They'll have followed my last signal to this area.
Good luck, Zeta.
His persona at the end was a little more normal looking, I feel like. So,
that final sequence, it's one of those things where for most of the episode, it's kind of the Star Wars thing where people are just firing lasers at each other and missing.
Right.
And then at the end, all of the Bennett and all of the agents do start hitting Zeta, but there's no visible damage on his frame. He's just sort of getting knocked backwards. Which I guess because it was going to turn out that he faked any damage to himself, so they couldn't have actual holes going through him and stuff like that. But
makes sense.
But that's, again, we've talked about that. That's usually a hallmark of a robot or any non-human villain in one of these shows. Is they always took that as an opportunity to blow it up or rip it apart or dismember it in some hugely violent way that they could never do with a normal human in an episode. But yeah, that final little bit there, I think it's clever there where he falls off the building and you look down and you see him almost completely dismembered in fire, and then as Batman swoops down, the hologram goes away and he just sort of stands up as normal. I think that's kind of a clever little bit there. And
yeah, the transition from that, there's a little glitch that happens, you see in the way when he transforms back from this exploding pile of debris back into his standard form. So I thought that was done really well. That's kind of what I wish they had done, having that little glitch as he puts his hand in him through. It's only 3 or 4 times too.
Right.
So it's not like they're like, oh, we need to save money for the end here. It's I feel like he could have done that throughout. I think the NSA agents look fine. There's they all have these uniform, dark suits with green goggles on. I guess that's in the future. The NSA just hands out green goggles when you join.
Is Bennett a descendant of the Weather Wizard, do you think?
100%. Similar pattern.
Same hairstyle, same like general jawline.
That's right.
And the green goggles.
Affinity for green goggles. That's right.
That's like a great nephew of the Weather Wizard, as far as I'm concerned.
Hey, it's canon until proven otherwise.
That's right. That's our role on the show. But yeah, like I said, I think the Zeta design itself, again, I didn't love because it doesn't emote, but I did like the cleverness of sort of the way the skeleton moves around and everything. And yeah, I think as the episode goes on, that scene with Batman and him and then the agents coming in is fun, and I do think there's some cool moments there, and even that opening sequence when you're not quite aware what's going on, and the hands burst out of the top of the flaming car, and this older woman bursts out of it and starts pulling guns out. It's a pretty wacky sequence. I settled on a 7 out of 10 for visuals. I like it, but I think, especially with the tools they were kind of given, I kind of was hoping to see Zeta use some other sort of ingenuitive weaponry in the final fight, even if it was non-lethal stuff. He does use the ski as a weapon. That was pretty funny. But yeah, we don't really get to see him. And that sort of dramatic posing of him pulling the gun on Bennet, and Batman pulls the batarang out and is ready to throw it, and then Zeta crushes the gun. That's good and dramatic and well done. But yeah, so a solid 7 out of 10 from me.
There you go. I went just a tick lower. I went a 6 out of 10. I will say, speaking of batarangs, there is some inconsistency throughout the episode. At least on 2 occasions, Batman throws a batarang, and then in the very next cutscene, it's turned into those little half-disc, like bat disc things that he shoots out of his wrists. I don't know how or why that would have changed from scene to scene, but it sure does if you stop it and watch. And we're watching this on the it was all digital animation anyway, but we're watching this on the fabulous HBO Max streaming service. So as far as we know, it's the most up-to-date revision of all the episodes of this animation. So those are still there, as far as, for some reason, batarangs turning into bat discs. There's a back-to-back scene. There's a scene where the NSA is still trying to track Zeta, and they're inside this moving van on the highway, and there's a green glow. It's all dark inside except for the green glow coming from their computer. So the entire scene is sort of shaded with this very neon green coming from the computer. I thought that was done well. And then immediately from that, they cut back to the ChipCon plant, and that's a very cold blue color that they ended up going with that. And I thought it was a great transition from, you're in the strategy war room, mobile war room, if you will, on the road here, and it's bright green, and there are these agents huddled around a computer, and then the very next scene it's cold and dark and blue, and you just have machines running and manufacturing. I thought that was great. Within that fight between Batman and Zeta, there's also, as you mentioned, he sort of plugs it. He grabs a hold of an electrical line and then shoots electricity through his hand and then electrocutes Batman. I did like that as well. But as far as excitement goes, there's not a whole lot to really look at and say, oh yeah, that was really, really exciting, really good. There's a car chase at the beginning, but that lasts a very, very short amount of time before they crash and the gunfighting begins. So because of all those things, that's why I ended up giving it just a above average 6 out of 10.
Very good.
All right, Liam, let's move on to music now. Music this week is done by, I didn't make a note. Oh, Michael McQuistion, as you tell me. Michael McQuistion did the music for this week's episode. So Mr. McQuistion took care of the music this week, and I gotta say, there's only really one scene that I feel like the music really stood out to me. We have some classic Batman drums and guitar and synthesizer for the majority of it. But for me, the main standout was that sort of final sequence as they shoot it at Zeta and he falls off the roof. Did you have anything that specifically stood out for you?
Yeah, I think the music when he is telling Max the story of having replaced this man and seeing and living with his family, It's very un-Batman Beyond music. We're sort of very much back to sort of classic DCAU music. It's mostly strings and very sort of soft, somber music. And it's not like a super hummable piece of music or anything necessarily. But I think that it added a little bit of atmosphere to sort of lay off the electric guitar and the synthesizer there, and just let the strings kind of do their work, because they're sort of, this is the moment theoretically where Zeta rebelled against his programming, and him speaking about not wanting to deprive a father of seeing their children grow, and at the same time not wanting to deprive the children of seeing their father ever again. And I thought the music in that scene, it's very soft and understated, but I thought it did a good job of adding to that moment.
There you go. Yeah, and I think that final sequence on the roof there, as they're shooting, the agents are shooting at him, and it seems like Zeta's story is coming to this sort of tragic ending here, as he's sort of refusing to fight back. He's just accepting what's coming. He's gonna fall off this roof, and he falls down, and music swells to a very tragic end there, and they look over the edge, and it sort of leads you to this somber single note, and they look down as this pile of debris is smoking, and
there it is! Fire!
Get down there! Retrieve the synthoid. Come on, let's go. Around this way.
He fell over here.
And then Batman flies down and sees Zeta get back up, and the music sort of, again, we're just very understated in the background as Zeta gets back up, transforms, looks at Batman, and then walks off. And then Batman drops a bomb to sort of cover his tracks, and the music sort of swells again as Batman flies off. And that was the one scene that I felt like really stuck out for me. So not anything really bad this week. We didn't really get a true Zeta theme that I was able to sort of recognize. Again, maybe not as much opportunity for them to establish one here. So, and if this is not a official backdoor pilot, they didn't have all that stuff figured out yet on a Zeta theme and all of that. So, for all of those reasons, I do think that final scene is pretty powerful. I agree with you that the scene where he's recapping to Max is pretty good also. The chase scenes and the fight scenes have great classic Batman Beyond rhythm music in the background. So I ended up giving music a 6 out of 10. What about you?
Yeah, I went the exact same score. I also went a 6 out of 10 for music this week. I think even the little bit at the end there, as we see sort of Zeta get on the train, and we cut back to Terry, who's sort of watching from the building, and he kind of smiles and then turns to fly away. And the music there, it's sort of it's of a similar of note to the end credits music. So I think it kind of feeds into that end credits, which ironically, of course, you never heard the end credits music if you were watching this on Kids WB back in the day.
Right.
But now that we're watching it on a streaming service or on our Blu-rays, that's we're able to actually kind of hear that transition go actually a little. I think it's a little more seamless as you hear the music sort of start to ramp up a little bit as Terry flies off into the night there. So yeah, some good stuff. Nothing tremendous, not maybe Mr. McQuistion's best work, but still some good stuff to be found.
Very good. All right, Liam, let us wrap up our episode this week as we begin to talk about our voice cast. So I know that we have a fairly large voice cast this week. A lot of regulars and originals returning that we have to talk about, and one voice that I guess Zeta's voice, which ended up being maybe the biggest guest star of all, but we do have a few other voices you may recognize here as well playing minor roles. Let's talk about this week's voice cast.
Yeah, so as far as our regular guest casts, we briefly have Lauren Tom as Dana. We briefly have Stockard Channing as Barbara Gordon. I think we're getting to the end of Miss Channing's episodes, because I believe post the Return of the Joker movie, Angie Harmon takes over that role.
Okay.
So,
Interesting.
because at least in the movie, I know it's not Stockard Channing. That was actually part of the recasting, was she was not available during the recording for the movie. So I think this is maybe one of the last times we'll hear Miss Channing as Barbara. But yeah, and then and of course we have Cree Summer as Max. We'll talk more about her in a minute. But yeah, as far as our guest cast goes, we do have a few notable ones. Joe Spano as Bennet, who folks might know from, among other things, Apollo 13, as well as Hollywoodland, and quite a few different television shows, and the NCIS show, and that show your grandparents watch. All of those CBS shows your grandparents watch. He's probably guest starred on at least a couple of them. That's right. But yeah, he does a solid job. He doesn't have a lot to do. He's in the opening scene, and then gets to be a bit more menacing, I think, at the end there when Zeta's on the run in the train station. He's sort of calling out to him, telling him, we'll work this out. You're just malfunctioning. Come back to us. We'll fix you. I think he gets to be a little bit more menacing there, but I think he does a pretty solid job as the evil government man.
Yeah, he's fine. We know that he gets recast for this. This character comes back, but he gets
a recurring theme of this Zeta, of the few Zeta characters that were created in this episode.
Yeah, right, exactly. So I think Kurtwood Smith is actually who ends up being cast as him, which is definitely a more prominent, recognizable voice. But yeah, he's fine. He's fine for this role. He has a little bit of dialogue that requires him to do some exposition in explaining to Barbara Gordon just who Zeta is, and he's fine. He sounds like an evil government agent, even if he's not completely evil.
Yeah, for sure. Otherwise, in the cast, we have E.T. McClurg as Miss Martel, really as Zeta, pretending to be her, but folks might know her from movies like Ferris Bueller, and she's the car rental lady in Trains, Planes, and Automobile. So some
Who could
fun.
forget that award-winning role?
Well, that is a pretty memorable scene in the movie.
Yeah,
but yes, another sort of character actor, sort of a lot of minor roles in many movies and TV shows over the years. But I thought that was a good shout there. And speaking of Zeta himself, we have Gary Cole, who is another one of those guys who you may not know by name, but if you saw him, you've definitely seen something he's done over his career. Whether you would know him from Veep or Talladega Nights or Dodgeball or a lot of other comedies from the early and mid 2000s. Very talented actor. As far as a Zeta goes, they do have a voice effect. Now, we give them credit now because this is like a scale we have to rate on now individually for voice effects post our Dr. Fate episode of Superman.
Goodness.
With both the Doctor and Karkel's nearly unintelligible voice performances in those episodes because of the effects. I can understand everything he's saying, and it's meant to be a cold robotic voice, and it's very much he sticks to that. It's not, they don't ask him, even in those more quote unquote emotional moments when he's describing his seeing the man's family, or at the end when he makes the decision not to kill Bennett. He sticks to that cold robotic voice. I mean, he does a fine job for what was asked of him.
Yeah, he's fine. He is not supposed to show any emotion, and he doesn't even slip into even somewhat emotion as he decides to throw away his guns, and even at the end when he chooses that very dramatic moment, as you said, where he has the choice to put down the weapon, he doesn't come over the top and show really any emotion at all. So I feel like he followed good direction for what Andrea Romano requested of him, to continue to be a robot despite this changing of his DNA in a way. So yeah, I think he does a fine job. I didn't find anything offensive by it. They again they recast him. He's not Dietrich Bader ends up playing Zeta on the actual show.
Right.
So they must not. Whoever was in charge of voice casting for that show, I don't know if it was Andrea Romano or somebody else, but they didn't love it enough to continue, or maybe he wasn't quite available or whatever for the project. But yeah, they decided to move in a different direction for his second appearance, and Zeta does return in a Batman Beyond episode because there was a crossover that happened between the shows later on. But I would assume that Dietrich Bader again reprises that role at that point since he's established on the show. So he's kind of one and done here. I appreciate him as a comedy actor, and I would not have picked him out as the person that voiced Zeta for this. So I think he does a fine job at being a robot.
Yeah. And yeah, of course, as mentioned, probably the best stuff is him playing off of Cree Summer as Max. And as mentioned, there's no Kevin Conroy in this episode, no Bruce Wayne at all. So Will Friedle does a solid job as Batman. I think in the scene where he sort of takes Max aside to tell her that he's not sure that he can kind of just let Zeta walk away. I think he does some good work there, and then that final scene as he sort of has his faith rewarded as Zeta doesn't kill Bennet. I think he does some good stuff there. But yeah, overall, not a great job, I didn't think, by anybody, but not a bad job either. And I settled on a 6 out of 10 for voice acting this week.
Yeah, I actually went on the same. I gave it the same score, 6 out of 10. There's not an over-the-top, I don't think, performance. I think Cree Summer, this might be some of her best work that we've heard so far. She has a lot to do in this episode and a fairly large role to carry because she kind of plays the role, I guess, that we would normally get Kevin Conroy. We get that different voice than you hear other than Terry, or the voice of reason to Terry. So she kind of has the larger load to carry for this week. So I think she does a great job of doing that. But there's not a lot, I feel like, performance-wise. There's nothing that's bad. It's just there's not a lot this week that I thought was outstanding.
Yeah, and I will just mention here, because I forgot to mention in plot, that the voiceover at the train station, that I believe that is also Cree Summer doing that voice, happens to mention both Central City and Dakota, which I believe this was the first mention of Dakota, because I think this episode predates Static starting on Kids WB. So
that's weird, because remember they didn't
right.
intentionally plan it to be linked to the DCAU.
So yeah, maybe they knew the show was in production and they didn't know whether it was going to be that. Well, we saw that in Static later on, where they referenced the Titans.
Right. That's true.
And then that show didn't end up being a DCAU show. So yeah, that might just I guess they just picked a random other fictional DC town to mention besides Central City. But yeah, I thought it was worth noting that Dakota gets shouts. Still no idea what state it's in, but it does exist.
Midwest someplace, probably. Maybe we don't
sure
know. All right, well, that will begin to wrap us up for today, so we need to give our final scores. Liam, totaling everything up for this week's episode, I end up with a 23 out of 40. What about you?
Yeah, and I'm just a couple notches higher. I am at a 25 out of 40. Rewatchability, this is again like a reversal of what I feel like is normal, which is where we go, well, it's not really that important, but it's a good episode, so watch it. Here it's like, I didn't think this was a particularly great episode. It's not bad. It's a pretty easy to watch 22 minutes.
Very middle of the road as far as.
But yeah, this is not one I would put on, especially not as a Batman episode and in a bubble, correct, which is how we kind of review these. I don't think it really would get a thumbs up in that way, but this not only does this character come back in its own series and back into Batman Beyond later on, but yeah, as we mentioned, these robots or prototypes of Zeta show up in Justice League and Justice League Unlimited, and even sort of indirectly tie into Cadmus stuff. So I think you do have to watch it, because I think those references in Justice League are there for people who saw this episode and people who know who Zeta is. So in order to enhance your viewing of if you want to get all the winks and the nods, especially that I think they started putting in the later seasons of Justice League, this is one of those winks and nods. So
yep. Yeah, I think this is an unfortunate must watch. I think it's a must watch. So if you're watching the entirety of Batman Beyond, yes, because there's another episode later on that that references this directly, that has the character show back up. Has to be included in the Batman Beyond mythos. It definitely is, in the grand scheme of things. It has its own show that, like it or not, because Batman Beyond shows up on it and there's references to other Batman Beyond episodes on that show, and other characters.
Yep.
It's a part of the DCAU, so you have to include this character in it. This is his origin story, essentially. Yeah. So, or his first appearance in the DCAU. So you have to watch it for that reason, and for the tie-in to the Cadmus stuff. And that stuff is sort of ancillary. Maybe you could explain it away, and maybe just not get it if you so choose not to understand it. But to understand why they're referencing those specific robots in those scenarios, yeah, I think you have to watch it. So. Yeah, don't watch this because it's a great episode. Watch this because you have to. I think that's what we settled on.
Yeah, it's too integral to both the Batman Beyond series and even has, like we said, some ties to the to series that came after this, but were set before it. I think this is definitely a thumbs up for its timeline and DCAU importance, not so much because of its quality as a standalone episode.
Yeah, I agree. All right, Liam, well, that would begin to wrap things up for this week. Thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget to check us out on your favorite social media platform at DCAU Review. Liam runs our Twitter account, as I always say, and does a great job over there. We love interacting with you guys. So if you have a thought on this week's episode, if you have a thought on Zeta, if you have a thought on whether or not this is an episode that you must watch, send us a tweet at DCAU Review. Join the conversation. You can also follow us over on Instagram at DCAU Review there. We tend to post clips from the episodes that we're covering throughout the week. We got some other great DCAU content always going up all of the time. So make sure you give us a follow there. You can also send us a message on there if you have thoughts and you don't have Twitter and you want to join the conversation. Go right ahead and do so. Don't forget also, if you listen to us on your favorite podcast app and you would like to support us, so we got a couple different ways you can support us. So you can do so by subscribing to us on your favorite podcast app. If that podcast app allows you to leave a review, you can go ahead and do that. Leave a 5-star review, maybe a little paragraph about what you love about the show, what you enjoy about it. We always love reading feedback, positive and negative. So if there's things that you would like to see differently done, leave that in the review also. Also, if you want to support us another way, you can go ahead and pick up a shirt or a hat, a piece of merch, if you will, from the DCAU Review merch shop. You can get there by going to DCAUreview.com. Click on the shop, pick yourself something up. And if you don't have extra dollars that you want to throw our way, that's totally understandable. We still love you. But you can head on over onto YouTube, and you can subscribe to the Pod Tower YouTube channel. That is where not only you get our content, our entire library is available for listening there in video form, videos with all of the audio attached to it, and then we post the new episodes each and every week there. But you also get great, amazing podcast content from both the Watchtower database and Tim Talk as well. Both teams there doing some great stuff in their own right. So check that out. So you can support us by subscribing there. We're looking to get boost our subscription ship. That's not the word. I don't know what the word is. Boost our subscribers there. So do us a favor and follow that. But Liam, coming up next week, we will continue here with Batman Beyond, meaning that we have another episode to cover here in the future Gotham. So what do we have on tap for next week?
That's right. Next week is a exciting episode. It not only is going to feature the return of Agent Bennet already.
What?
It's going to feature the return of maybe one of our favorite Batman Beyond villains that we've covered to date. That is the return of the Stalker in the episode Plague. A lot of stuff there. It also introduces the Cobra group, which comes back quite a few more times in the last season of Batman Beyond, and so lots to discuss. A lot packed into a 22-minute episode, and we can't wait to discuss it next week.
That's right. But until then, I'm Cal.
And I'm Liam.
And we will talk to you on the next episode of the DCAU Review.
Bye-bye.